All right. So, just brief background in case anyone here or in the future is a little bit unfamiliar with Charles River Watershed Association. Our mission is to protect, enhance, and restore the Charles River and surrounding watershed. And we do that through science, advocacy, and the law. Our visual cyanobacteria monitoring program is part of our river science program. But we also focus on river restoration, so returning the Charles River to a more natural or less impacted state. And we also have our stormwater solutions, which focuses on reducing stormwater pollution into the Charles River and surrounding water bodies. That's currently our largest polluter or contributor to pollution in the Charles River. We have our climate resilience team, which mainly focuses on flooding and heat, but it's all about preparing us for the effects of climate change and making sure that communities are best prepped for that. And then we also have our uh, education and outreach process, which everyone at CRWA participates in. So that could range from different types of trainings and or visiting classrooms, working with school groups, and making sure people are kind of educated on the issues that are kind of facing the Charles River or the surrounding environments within their communities. Um, and we do work throughout all 35 of our communities within the watershed. We work at the local and state level mainly. We do some federal kind of grant work, but the majority of our work is very municipal and state level work. We've been around since 1965, so this is actually our 60th year of operation. So it's been a really big year for us. I'm very excited to kind of celebrate the work that we've been able to do over the years. And a fun little thing is that we are one of the older watershed associations kind of going on in the country. We've been at it for quite a while now. So like I said, thank you all for your interest in the visual cyanobacteria program. So this program was created in response to harmful algal blooms that the Charles River has experienced over the years. So the cyanobacteria are a type of naturally occurring bacteria that can bloom under the right conditions. So they can grow. They can grow into these large mats or very green swaths in the water that can lead to the release of things called cyanotoxins, which are toxic to humans. People's pets as well have died from cyanobacteria blooms. So they do pose a public health risk. And so this program was created to kind of keep an eye out for those types of blooms. We typically start to see those in the summer months. Usually kind of mid to late summers when we start to see the most kind of cyanobacteria activity, and those blooms have the highest potential for forming. Cyanobacteria do really well in hot weather conditions. And then, as I kind of mentioned earlier, we have kind of stormwater pollution is one of our biggest polluters, and the excess nutrients, such as phosphorus, that can go into the river during rain weather events can lead to the phosphorus acts as basically food for the cyanobacteria, which then can cause these large blooms to occur. And these can last from anywhere to a week to 12 weeks and can really impact the recreation and the public health of people. They're also very common to happen in kind of the lakes and ponds in many different areas. I know this past summer, Lake Winnipesaukee up in New Hampshire had some really big issues with cyanobacteria and harmful algal blooms. And so it's definitely kind of an emerging science and kind of keeping track of them. And many scientists are still working to better understand kind of the different toxins that they can create, which species that can create cyanobacteria or cyanotoxins, and which are kind of posing the main risks to folks. And so what this program is doing is it is, like I said, providing more eyes on the river so we can keep an eye out for if they're occurring, when they're occurring, and kind of the extent of the cyanobacteria blooms. So like I said, they can be quite large. They could, span a football field or even larger, or they could be kind of on the smaller side and just starting to form into these bloom-like conditions. The results that we get do go directly to, or we share them with the Department of Public Health, who is the kind of state agency that oversees cyanobacteria blooms. So a lot of times people will get notifications, or we'll hear from their like local public health boards that, this beach is shut down or this lake is shut down. They're the ones that are putting out those advisors. CRWA as an organization doesn't have the authority to do anything like that, which is why we share it with those state agencies who do have the authority to kind of put out the public notices about these harmful blooms. Um, so kind of, I was getting a little bit ahead of my slides there. So like I said, the lower basin of the Charles River, which is the main area that we see cyanobacteria blooms, which is like the Cambridge, Boston area, kind of the largest area. I would say basically anywhere from like Watertown Dam further downstream is the main area where we typically see larger cyanobacteria blooms happening. And they can, like I said, last for a week plus. We've seen them last for up to 12 weeks before in the Charles River. And the blooms can have become more frequent with the effects of climate change. So those warmer waters, greater precipitation events leading to more stormwater pollution entering the river. Um, and the other tricky thing about cyanobacteria blooms is because they're in the water, they can move, which is another really important factor when we're looking at cyanobacteria. Is through this program is that bloom staying in that position? A lot of times, wind or water flows could keep it tucked away into a cove somewhere, or it could cause it to shift further into a different area. So this program helps us to really keep an eye on that and make sure that we're giving the DPH the most kind of up-to-date information. And excuse me. Yeah, it's so we can give the DPH the most up-to-date information. We're giving people, while the Charles River, we don't have folks swimming in it regularly, it can still cause risk through boating and things. So we want to make sure that we're providing the public with the best information. Any questions so far? Like I said, if at any point, feel free to interrupt me or just raise the hand in the chat. We can keep it very casual. What I'm going to kind of talk about now is when we're doing visual assessments, there's a couple of things that you'll be asked about. And so one of the first things that our visual assessments are going to ask about is just kind of the base kind of status of the river. And one of the things that we're going to be looking at for that is kind of what is the conditions of the water. So we're looking at the water surface. And so the difference between calm water, which is, relatively flat. Usually when there's no wind happening, we have calm water. And then kind of scaling up from there with the wind for the rolling on the right there. White caps is when we start to see kind of waves starting to form, and they've got that little white from the kind of foaming or air there. And then choppy, which would be quite intense, wave action happening in the river, would be very rare. We'd probably only see that during large storm events happening. You're probably not going to be outside during the storm events doing visual assessments anyway during that, but just so if you are out there and you are making a visual assessment, that's kind of what it's looking for in that type of question. And the importance for that, like I said, is to kind of help understand the potential for that bloom to move to a different location. Higher wind conditions are going to potentially move large scale blooms elsewhere. Ways that we're going to look for cyanobacteria. So typically it appears green. It is also used to really in like the earlier days of understanding cyanobacteria and harmful algal blooms, you might have heard it as like blue-green algae. So it's very often like this very intense green color in the water that you're going to be looking at. But the different types of cyanobacteria can look a little bit different once you kind of get past the color. So these are kind of three examples here of what cyanobacteria can look in the water. So you've got that relatively intense green color. It can look like grass clippings are kind of floating in the water, or it can be more like specks of like what kind of would look like pollen maybe, all floating throughout the water. Those are kind of the two that we mainly see in very intense blooms. It can even create like a mat of like grimy green on the surface of the water, and that can become relatively thick as well. And so when we're looking at cyanobacteria, those are going to be kind of the things that we're looking to determine, is what I'm looking at cyanobacteria or is it something else? And some of those kind of false examples that can sometimes get a little bit confusing when you're doing a visual assessment are things like pollen. And I think that's kind of one of our big differences. Pollen is going to be on the surface of the water for the most part. It's not going to be throughout when you're looking into the water column, it's not often that it's, going throughout the whole water column, which in kind of this middle one here, where it is that more pollen-like look, it does kind of permeate throughout into the depth of the water, whereas the pollen is mainly on the surface here. The other one that can, at first glance, kind of look like cyanobacteria is going to be duckweed. And duckweed's just an aquatic plant that is on the surface of water. It has little roots on it, and it just kind of floats throughout the water column and moves with the wind. And it's kind of goes crazy if it kind of if it grows quite out of hand. But that's the same thing. It's just floating on the surface of water, and when you do look at it, it is leaves, and is completely safe to touch. And the other one that can pop up sometimes is something called filamentous algae, which is not a type of cyanobacteria. It is an algae that can just grow into these very long strands on water and can float. A really easy test to find out if you're looking at cyanobacteria versus filamentous algae is if you can find a stick nearby and poke it through and you can pick up the algae. It's not cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria does not collect in a long strand form that you would be able to pick up. Now, like I said, it can form mats, so you might get like a glob on the stick, but it's not going to be strands of things that you're going to be able to kind of like pull up like spaghetti on a stick, basically. The other thing that we're going to ask people to look for is going to be what is the extent of the bloom? And is it just kind of along the shoreline? Is it going further out into the river? And what is kind of the size of that extent? So are we looking at something the size of a car? These are specific examples from the way you will kind of submit the survey, which Maddie will go over. But is it the size of a car, the size of like a tennis court, or is it a football field? Kind of getting an idea of where the bloom is at in its stage of growth, essentially. And there are places as well to leave comments to further explain the extent of it as well. So, if you're like, okay, it's in just this cove, but it's also, I can see it's wrapping around this corner of the river here as well. There's place for you to explain that and add more depth to the observation as well. The other kind of thing to think about is, is it in that small kind of scale? That's what we would call like an isolated bloom versus the large extent on the right there, which you can see is kind of permeated throughout the whole water body. These are just a couple of other ways that you can see how cyanobacteria can look. The other thing that's going to often look like is like paint splotches. So you see here on the left, it looks like someone like spilled oil or paint that was green on the water, and it's kind of collecting these little bits here and moving around. And in very intense cases, it can start to look like the river has turned into pea soup. Which is not very good to see in your rivers. But those are a couple other examples of that. Going into it a little bit more, you can see that it also could look like this like green hazy color here. Or like I said, often we see this kind of grass clippings look that it can have. And so it looks like someone dumped all of their grass clippings from their lawn into the river. Any questions about what cyanobacteria might look like or might not look like before we get into kind of, Maddie's going to take over here and talk a little bit more about our system for actually submitting our data, which we do through this year actually. So we used to do this all in-house with our observations. We had our own kind of survey that we would have folks fill out. This year we've started using the EPA's bloomwatch app, which Maddie will describe in more detail, but it's a national survey. So you're contributing your data about the Charles River on a national scale for the EPA to also have more data on cyanobacteria blooms in the country. So it's a really cool opportunity to contribute to a larger set of data than what CRWA would normally be able to help have people contribute to, essentially. Submit. Oh, once again, getting ahead of myself. Before getting started, there is some materials that you'll likely want to have to help make your observations a little bit easier. So when you're doing your observations, you're going to be taking a lot of photos of this potential cyanobacteria. And so you do need a phone on you while you're out doing this. It doesn't have to be any kind of like a fancy, great quality photo, if you know, or anything like that. But you do need it for photos. And you can submit through the app on your phone, or you can submit through the web version if that's easier for you as well. If there is like a large amount of cyanobacteria present, it's really helpful if you have like a glass mason jar that's spare that you don't use for any kind of food or eating or anything like that, to bring that with you as well. That way you can take a kind of scoop of the water with a gloved hand. So here that we ask that people have, if you're going to be scooping up what you think might be cyanobacteria, you have a gloved hand on, either nitrile, latex, whatever protects your hand from the water to scoop through, and you can submit photos of that, and that just gives a clearer idea of what the cyanobacteria kind of looks like to the to EPA and to us as well. And if you're really trying to be like an all-star with the photos when you're doing the jar photo, if you can bring a piece of white paper with you to put behind the jar, it'll add a nice background of contrast, kind of like if you were getting like your ID taken, you want a nice white background to then have the best quality image of what you're submitting that's in the jar. Oh, and then for where we're looking for cyanobacteria, like I said, we mainly see it in the Lower Charles area, so that Watertown Dam and south. But we are not restricting anyone in this program to that. If you are someone who lives further upstream of the Charles River and you want to make observations, we will encourage that. We have even less eyes in that area, so if there are blooms present, it's really good to have people looking out in that area. But also, because we are submitting now to a kind of national database, feel free to use the skills and the apps from kind of this training or any experiences at any other bodies of water within the country that you're at. So if you're someone who does go to Lake Winnipesaukee or some other lake or pond in the country and you see cyanobacteria, all of the same steps here and that same app all apply to that area, to those as well. So you can use all this information for that as well. It's best to make observations where you can safely get close to the water as best as possible. Some of the photos that it's going to ask people for do ask for like photos of the shoreline, and all they get a little complicated. It's like because it's a national survey and it's from the the federal government, it's built broadly and doesn't always make for the best prompts for every area that you're going to be taking photos of, but just do your best to fill the prompts as long as you're getting decent quality photos of the cyanobacteria bloom that you're looking at. That is more than satisfactory. As far as frequency, this program is designed to mainly ideally fit within your daily life or your as much as possible. So if you do go out on the river, once a week and just want to make an observation, that's great. If you want to go out and do it more frequently, that's even better for us. One thing that I do like to emphasize is that it's good to still submit photos if there is no cyanobacteria present. The idea being that we are creating a timeline of, okay, at this date and this time, there was no cyanobacteria, so that when you do go there and there potentially is cyanobacteria, we have a better timeline of when that bloom started. So observations of no cyanobacteria are equally as valuable as observations that there is cyanobacteria, basically. That allows us to keep the river in the most or keep people in the most up-to-date status of the river, essentially. And now I will hand it off to Maddie, who's going to go over the bloomwatch app and how to actually submit the observations.
Thanks, Ryan. So I'm going to try to do this at a speed where you can follow along and download the app as we go if you want to, but I'm also going to remind you that we will be sharing this presentation and the recording afterwards, so you can follow along later. If it's going too fast, you can catch up, but do stop me if you have any questions along the way. So the app we're using is called bloomwatch. You can see the image on the right. If you search in the Apple or Google Play Store, you should be able to find it and download it. It's free. If you don't want to use it, there's also a browser version, which you can use the link on the slides when we share them, or you can just look up bloomwatch. The first thing it's going to ask for on your phone when you get it is for your location for the device and for the photos. You want to do that, and I'm going to say that if you're doing it on a computer afterwards, you want to make sure that when you're uploading your location, your time is for when you took the pictures and not for when it currently is, because it'll try sync to that. Okay, so when you have got into the app, you're going to enter this front page. It's like pretty straightforward. It can be a little slow at times, but you're going to want to sign in. So you see the three corners, three lines in the right corner. You can click on that, and then it'll give you an option to sign in. And we have a login that you can use for the ArcGIS that it'll prompt you with. And then when you enter that, you can just return to the front page and you can click download surveys. It's like on the bottom in the middle, if you're not following along, so you can see that. And then we want the one that should be at the top that says CyanoB Visual Monitoring Program. And when you select that, it'll just add it to your front page. So whenever you open the app, it'll do that. And then when we are at a site and we want to do a survey, we can just click collect, and that'll take us to the specific survey. Ryan, do you want to go to the next slide? Thanks. Okay, so if you are doing this in a little while and you forgot some of the information Ryan has gone over, you want a refresher, it's super helpful. It has all this information at the top that you can read through. Or you don't have to if you feel confident, you can continue. It'll ask for your username. We recommend just putting your first name and then the initial of your last name. For date and location, the location will automatically go to where you are. We recommend just checking it because sometimes it can put you to the other side of the river or around the corner of the pond, but usually it's pretty straightforward. And then just make sure it has the correct date. Okay, and then these questions should also hopefully be pretty straightforward. It asks you to select the water body type. It's a drop down. So for the Charles River, it'll be a river or stream. If it's a pond or lake, you can put that. And then you put the name of it. So for us, that'll be Charles River, but you can put Hardy Pond if that's who you're doing or somewhere else. And then does it have public access to the following? So for the Charles, it has boating and fishing. And if you're in an area more upstream that people swim at, then you can also put that. But if they don't, you don't need to. And then weather conditions. Again, it's a drop-down option, so you can just choose what the best one is. And then this is getting into the information that Ryan was going over earlier, so surface conditions. Do your best guess of what it's the most suited towards of those options. The extent of the bloom can be a little harder to get at, but again, just use your judgment and whatever you think is best. It has a no bloom present option because it is helpful if you are going out weekly, especially earlier on in the summer, to track when there isn't blooms, just so we know when they begin. And then general comments. This could be, the type of characteristics you saw that are making you think it's cyanobacteria. If you're going to the same site weekly, are there any big changes from previous weeks? Anything else you want to share about it? That's super helpful to put there. And then we get on to the photo section. As Ryan was saying, some of these can be quite specific. You don't need to follow them exactly. Do your best to match them or your interpretation of what would be best for them, and put a description underneath if there's something you think isn't clear or something you want to point out in each photo. And it asks you for 3 photos. The third one is where you can use a jar if you have that, and where it's useful if you have a white paper to hold it behind to increase contrast. And then finally, under submit observation, it gives you an option to put your email to be contacted. We ask that you put the charles@crwa.org for the email so we can track what you're submitting. Obviously, if you're doing this elsewhere, like in the Cape Cod, that's totally fine. We don't need those ones. But if it is on the Charles or around here, that would be super helpful for us to be able to have. And then you press submit.
And that's it. It's a very, very simple process. It's very, it takes you right through it. Like I said, once you have the bloomwatch app, it'll take you very step by step, and there's not a whole lot to it, which is what we like to see in community science programs, and keep it nice and simple for folks as best we can. Does anyone have any questions about anything that we've kind of talked about today, or that
Yeah.
would like?
Yes, this is Jim Hall. I couldn't follow like downloading the app. Are you going to send us an email with the websites and the app titles and everything that we can use at our leisure to access this information?
Yes, yeah, I will send a copy to everyone that has a recording of this video, as well as a copy of the slides, which have links within them. This video will also be up on the CRWA YouTube page and our Cyanobacteria page for further use for anyone. Yeah, I get it. It's not easy to follow presentations to download apps at the same time, but we try our best to take our time with it. Great. Someone, sorry.
Actually, Ryan, I had 2 questions. A few of us, as someone met, we're from Hardy Pond. Well, one question just generally, can a bloom at Hardy Pond travel down into the Charles?
I am personally not very familiar with Hardy Pond. I don't know that does it connect to the Charles River in any way?
Yeah, we're in Waltham, and Hardy Pond is probably maybe 2 or 3 miles from the Charles River, folks.
I would say 3 or more, but it's a winding path.
Yeah, I would say it'd be relatively difficult for it to like fully like flow in. I don't know specifically that I don't want to say with confidence that it's impossible.
That's good then.
But yeah, they tend to stay relatively contained to if it's in a pond or a lake situation.
Okay.
If there is an outflow, there's always the chance.
Okay. And I'm wondering, we have a group of volunteers who are going to be testing. Can we put in 2 emails? Is it possible to put in to be able to be tracking? We're working.
I haven't tried, but you're more than welcome to put in 2 emails for that.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And then my last question was just to double check. People have talked. I guess it's not terribly important how deep the water is for the visual testing. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's yeah, I would say there's no big like kind of necessity in the depth, knowing the depth of the water for cyanobacteria.
Okay.
They are mainly contained to, they float, they're mainly contained to the kind of surface level of them for the most part. Give or take a couple feet, but they do mainly stay on the surface.
And where we take the sample from, we did hear something about it was important to not do it, say, first thing in the morning, because the cyanobacteria goes to the bottom of the pond at night and then comes back up by around 10 in the morning. Is that so? I mean, do we have to avoid early morning, but we could do the rest of the day, or?
Yeah, I would say, can I get back to you on that one? I have heard something similar to that, but I don't know how tight that is. We typically do our own cyanobacteria sampling. Usually, I mean, we get out there around like 9:30ish, but that's kind of working hours for us at that point. So we've never kind of restricted us to the early morning. I'll check in with Mari about that one and get back to you.
That would be great. I have one last question, because we are looking a little to the future, and we may move to do other types of testing, with taking samples. Is it how dangerous is it to be in a kayak in a cyanobacteria bloom, or should we just really avoid that almost all costs.
I would say you're best at avoiding it if you can. It is unsafe conditions, especially if you've got any like open cuts on your body or anything, and the water splashing in. I am not a public health expert by any means. I would definitely reach out to kind of like a public health board for their full recommendation. I personally, it does lead to unsafe like boating conditions though, so I would recommend against going out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for all of this.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. Oh, one thing I did want to share is just so the because we're part of now this kind of national effort with the EPA with this, they actually have a dashboard, which I would like to share just so everyone gets a quick look at it. And this is included in the slides. It's also on EPA's website, but this is where all of your submissions are going essentially. And it looks, can you all see this, right? I'm not just, okay. I was like, I don't know if I actually just shared my my slides. But let's give it a second to load. Here's the map. Apologies, my computer is a little slow today. Here we go. All right, so these are all of the submissions that have been gone through bloomwatch since they started it. So you can see they're happening all over the contiguous United States and even into some in Canada, it looks like, and even a few in Mexico might have been submitted as well, which I think is very cool. And you can see here when you zoom into Massachusetts, and we're going to go towards the Charles River, you can see where folks in the past have made observations, CRWA staff included over the years. And over here, let's just click on this one. It'll load. But as you can see, this person got some photos here. You can see kind of someone from Charles River did this in 2024 in bloomwatch, actually. Our logo's right there. But as you can see, this is kind of the photos that you would expect with the jar. This is kind of the green haze it was looking like here that they were submitting. So if you're interested in just looking more at kind of the date of everything, this dashboard is very interesting to kind of look through cyanobacteria blooms throughout the years that people have submitted. And like I said, still very important to do the ones when there is no cyanobacteria present. Those are equally as valuable for us and for data's sake as well. So the weird thing in science is like a nothing is just as equal to something for this type of stuff.
I have a question. If we're going to use a glass jar to actually capture some water and take a picture of it, we're going to use a glove, of course, so you don't get exposed. Any special technique for dipping your thing? You want to go fast, slowly, or any special?
No, yeah, it's mainly just to capture it so you can get kind of like a better up close of the cyanobacteria without it being this like.
I'm wondering about
surface
mixing and turbulence when you're dipping your jar. Is that significant?
No, not that I've experienced in the
Okay,
past. No.
thank you.
Ryan,
Mhm.
I'm wondering, we're trying at the Hardy Pond. This is like an effort to coordinate some volunteers to monitor our pond over the next 20 weeks. And we have identified with Maddie and with Marlena the southern part or I think it's the southern part of the pond where the blooms tend to gather because of the wind. But we're thinking of setting up something so that we have at least one every week sampling from our volunteers 1 or 2 times. What frequency would you recommend? Like say over the summer period, 20 weeks. And we're trying to, we have already, somebody's noted a little bit of a bloom. Would you think that would be sufficient to begin the database for our pond in terms of like what's happening 20 weeks, like from July, basically from now, from the training all the way through like around October?
I would say it depends, like I said, on whether or not blooms are fully present. I would say once a week is a great place to start. If you can get up to like 2 to 3 times a week at a certain point, that would be best,
Okay.
especially if there's a bloom present. That way you have a higher frequency of data tracking that bloom, basically, and those changes that could occur. But once a week is a great place to get started.
To start 1 to 2 times. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. A very good presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great questions. All right. If there's no other questions, we can hop off a little bit early for folks. And I should have this out to all this information out to everyone Monday at the latest is my plan. I have some field work tomorrow, and it just depends on whether or not that pushes into later in the day than I'm expecting, essentially. But so Monday at the latest, you guys should expect the recording with the slides and all of that information followed up, written up for everyone as well.
Thank you, Ryan. And thanks.
Thank you, Ryan and Maddie.
volunteers.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, and if any questions pop
Maddie.
up after this, feel free to send me an email as well. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening and weekend soon.
Where's the, oh,